Fans of Steam Room Stories, the movie, but didn't know we wrote a male-male romance novel that's a sequel to the film? We thought so. Well, Revenge of the Brobot is just that, a hilariously silly, sexy novel that picks up where the movie left off. Haven't seen the film? Well, shame on you. But that's okay. This campy classic stands up on its own and is available on Amazon or our website, steamroomstories.com. Purchasing any of our books and movies supports the podcast, so thanks in advance for supporting this show. Revenge of the Brobot. Check it out now. James was just about to start college in Malibu and was excited to immerse himself in California's culture. Having always dreamt of being a surfer, he finally was able to get an old surfboard and hit the beach. He was quickly mesmerized by the skilled surfers and the athletic prowess of the young men riding the waves around him. Among the surfers, a striking young, muscular Aussie caught his eye. Unable to resist the ocean's pull, James decided it was time to attempt to surf himself. Despite his enthusiasm, he quickly learned he was no match for Mother Nature and was quickly put in his place. Fortunately for James, the hunky Australian surf stud was nearby to lend a helping hand and perhaps a bit more. Cowabunga, dudes and dudettes. It's me, your host, Nate, getting ready to hang 10 with you today. Yup, this month's Steamy Stories takes you on a trip to the sunny California coastline and introduces you to James, a fresh-faced freshman on his very first Malibu adventure. Sand, sun, and surfers? Sounds like a winning combination for a steamy story. Well, at least it is for him. So let's wax up our boards and prepare to shred in some tubes as I tell you about James's hot summer fling on this month's Steamy Stories. James stood at the threshold of a new chapter in his life. Having just graduated high school in the quiet suburbs of Utah, he was electrified by the prospect of attending Pepperdine University. Not only did it offer great academic opportunities, but its Malibu, California location was nestled right against the sprawling beauty of California's coastline. James's tall and lean physique suggested a natural athleticism, a body honed not through gyms, but through an active, engaged lifestyle. His dark hair, perpetually tousled as if he'd just run his fingers through it or had been tousled by the wind, gave him a roguish charm, an effortless look that seemed both deliberate and casual. His eyes were perhaps his most compelling feature. Hazel, they were a hypnotic mix of greens and browns, vibrant and lively, reflecting his spirit and zest. These eyes, piercing and expressive, seemed to draw people in, hinting at depths of emotion and a keen intelligence. They lit up when he smiled, darkened in earnest conversation, and sparkled with humor, making him approachable and enigmatic. The apartment he rented for the summer was modest, but boasted a breathtaking view of the ocean. It sat directly on the beach facing the vast Pacific Ocean. It was a location James had dreamed of back home many times. The previous tenant, an old surfer with a laid-back demeanor and a rich history of waves etched into his face, had left a surfboard on the balcony. "Take it out sometime. She's there to be ridden," he had said with a knowing smile, as if subtly initiating James into an ancient, sacred fellowship of the waves. For weeks, James could only gaze out at the ocean from the deck of his flat, the surfboard a silent reminder of adventures yet to begin. Compelled by an increasing curiosity of what it would be like to surf, James eventually strapped the board to the Jeep he had recently purchased and drove to a small, secluded beach just off the Pacific Coast Highway, across from a cozy seafood restaurant named The Real Inn. James spent his first few days relaxing on the sand, not daring yet to confront the beckoning waves. Instead, he watched others skim across the ocean's surface, their bodies and boards moving as one with the swells. Among the regular array of surfers, one man stood out. He was a vision of strength and freedom. His sun-bleached hair was a chaotic halo around his sun-kissed face, and his blue eyes were as bright and clear as the sky. A light dusting of hair across his chest hinted at a mature ruggedness. James found himself captivated by this man who seemed so at ease in the very element that James found so intimidating. James told himself he was watching the man as research, preparing mentally for the day he would finally gather the courage to face the waves. But deep down, he knew his fascination with this particular surfer ran deeper. Something about the way this hunk moved, with such unbridled joy and confidence, stirred a longing in James, a desire he had not ever felt before. As the days passed, James's routine remained unchanged. He arrived early, watched the surfers, and stayed until the sun dipped below the horizon. He knew he would step into the water eventually, but for now he was content to observe, dream, and slowly fall for a man he hadn't ever spoken a word to. Strapping the surfboard to his Jeep and heading to the beach had become a ritual, one where the conclusion was always the same. He would return home without having ever touched the water. But today was different. Something about the warm sun and the perfect crispness of the day convinced him that it was time to challenge himself and dive into the unknown by heading into the ocean. With a mix of nervous energy and newfound resolve, James untied the surfboard from the Jeep's roll bar and carried it to the water's edge. "Everyone has to start somewhere," he muttered to himself, pushing aside any lingering self-consciousness about his lack of experience. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He was there to ride the waves, or at least start to learn how. As James stepped into the crisp, clear water, the waves broke powerfully before him, their force daunting yet exhilarating. He decided not to attempt standing or riding a wave just yet. Instead, he would paddle out beyond the surf to where the ocean was calmer, and he could gather his thoughts and courage. He scanned the horizon for his mysterious surfer, who had unknowingly captured so much of his attention. Today of all days, the surfer was nowhere to be seen. James felt a twinge of disappointment, but quickly dismissed it, focusing on the task at hand. "I'm here to surf," he reminded himself, feeling a sense of relief to have the ocean to himself. Paddling out proved more challenging than James had anticipated. Each stroke fought against the pull of the waves, and he felt his muscles strain under the effort. "No wonder all these guys are all so fit," he thought, gasping as he finally cleared the breaking waves and lay on the board, calming his pounding heartbeat, floating under the California sun. There, amidst the vast blue, James felt a profound sense of peace. The sun warmed his skin, and the rhythmic sound of the ocean soothed his nerves. Floating there, he felt connected to the world in a way he hadn't before, surrounded by the vastness, yet supported by the gentle swell of the sea. "Oh, life couldn't be better," he thought, a smile spreading across his face. Gratitude filled him as he took in the beauty of his surroundings, the rugged coastline, the endless sky, the freedom of the open water. It was a moment of pure joy, of liberation from the doubts and fears that had held him back, as he laid on his board, eyes closed and heart open. As James lay floating on his surfboard, soaking in the tranquil sounds of the California coastline, he was abruptly reminded of the ocean's unpredictable nature. A large wave, unforeseen and formidable, quickly built up behind him. In a fleeting moment, the calm of the sea transformed into a looming wall of water. Startled, James could only watch as the wave surged towards him, too late to paddle away or dive under it. The wave broke powerfully just in front of him, and James was violently thrown from his board. He plunged into the chaotic surf, tumbling underwater like a rag doll caught in a storm. The tether connecting him to his surfboard yanked the board back towards him, and it struck him in the head, causing sharp pain and making him see stars. Disoriented and struggling to regain his bearings, James struggled in the foamy surf, unable to decipher which way was up, down, or sideways. He flailed violently, frantic for air, but then, by chance, finally surfaced, gasping desperately for air. The salt water burned in his throat, and his head throbbed from the impact. He chastised himself for his carelessness. How foolish of me! How could I be so careless? I could have drowned. The harsh reality of his inexperience in the face of the ocean's might was a bitter pill to swallow. Shaken, James swam back to shore, pushing through the last of the breaking waves, dragging his surfboard behind him as he staggered out of the water. He kneeled in the breaking shallow tides for a minute to regain his composure before proceeding onto the sand. While wondering what to do next, he remembered an ambulance regularly parked in the lot near his Jeep. He had often wondered what the ambulance was doing at the beach, and now it was clear. It was parked there, seemingly for situations like this. Concerned about the impact to his head and the possibility of a concussion, James decided it was best to seek a professional opinion. He carried his surfboard and trudged through the hot sand towards the ambulance. James steadied himself as he approached, his heart racing, no longer from his recent tumble, but from the thrilling proximity to the surfer he'd admired from afar. The man was shirtless and striking as he casually lounged beside a cooler of drinks and a small barbecue, grilling freshly caught fish. He was greeted with a warm, full smile and a casual, "G'day, how you doing?" in a thick Australian accent that made James's heart skip a beat. Up close, the surfer was even sexier than James had previously thought. As the sun reflected off the sun-bleached highlights in his unkempt hair, and his chest muscles ripped subtly with each movement. James hesitated, momentarily lost in the man's deep voice and mesmerizing presence. "Sorry to bother you as you're eating, but I took quite a knock on the head out there. I'm wondering if you're an EMT, and if so, I wanted to know if you could take a look at my injury," he mumbled in an unsteady voice. The man chuckled as his eyes crinkled at the corners. "Ah, sorry for the mix-up. This old ambulance is actually my home." He stood, moving with an easy grace, and swung open the ambulance's back doors so that James could take a look inside. The inside of the vehicle had been cleverly converted into a plush living space that radiated warmth and ingenuity. The interior boasted a personal sink, a refrigerator, mahogany cabinetry, recessed lighting, and a bed that lowered from the ceiling into a plush sleeping chamber. "I built it myself so I could live at the beach and surf first thing in the mornings." James was not only impressed by the craftsmanship of the inside of the vehicle, but also captivated by the sheer cool factor of the man's setup. The Aussie continued. "So, sadly, it's not a proper ambulance, and no, I'm not a doctor or EMT, but I'll gladly look at the lump on your noggin, if it'll help." James leaned forward, thinking that this man must have similar bruises to his, since he was a surfer and this kind of injury must be commonplace. The surfer carefully brushed James's wet hair away to inspect the top of his forehead as he politely introduced himself. "The name's Sasha. It's nice to meet you. Yeah, that's a nasty bump, but I don't know that you need medical attention. But that said, you should certainly not drive. Sasha took a sip of his beer. James replied eagerly, "Maybe you're right. I'll join you for a beer if that's okay." Sasha, with earnestness, concern, suggested, "Well, maybe not a beer just yet. Let's get you a cool drink." As he poured an iced tea for James and grabbed himself another frosty Foster's ale from the cooler. James sat with Sasha till sunset, exchanging personal histories, aspirations, and future dreams. It was hours later that Sasha looked out at the still, vast blue ocean and sighed. If you haven't seen the sun duck behind the ocean yet, you're in for a treat. James had nowhere to go, and certainly nowhere he'd rather be at this moment, so he simply replied, "That sounds awesome. I'd love to watch the sunset from the beach with you." Although, in truth, he'd watch the sunset from his apartment's balcony daily, but sitting next to this ripped surfer stud suddenly made the dusk so much more beautiful. As the orange, pink, and blue hues turned into a star-spangled sky, Sasha nonchalantly reached over and brushed the wild and wavy hair aside from James's forehead. Sasha's touch caught James off guard as he slightly jerked his head back, then stopped and smiled at him. Sasha realized he had overstepped his boundaries with his innocent gesture as he swiftly pulled his hand back. "Oh, sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I simply wanted to see if the lump on your head was subsided or turned into a bruise. I apologize. I didn't mean to be so forward." James chuckled in a sweet, reassuring manner. No, of course, it's fine. It's very sweet of you to look after me like that. I think it's quite lovely. Thank you." The two men exchanged a knowing and intense smile between them. As Sasha further explained himself, "I hope you realize I was just curious as to how your head was." James immediately gave Sasha a mischievous wink and flirtatiously replied, "Well, I'll let you be the judge of that." James put down his drink and relocated to the nearby bed. Sasha was quick to join him in the ambulance for what promised to be a thorough examination of each other. Hey, I'm no doctor, but I could guess that whatever ailed James that evening, Sasha was able to kiss it and make it better. This is Steamy Stories, the podcast where romance turns bromosexual. Written by JC Calciano and hosted by me, Nate. I hope you'll join me next month for another titillating tale. But in the meantime, don't forget that all our steamy stories are compiled into a series of novellas titled Steam Room Confidential. They're available on Amazon or our website, steamystoriespodcast.com. So please check them out. Purchasing our books helps this podcast going. We thank you for listening and subscribing. Until next month. Later, bro.